Hey everybody, welcome to the Echo Leadership Podcast with Andy Wood. My name is David Hibisky, and today we're doing something just a little bit different for this episode. Today we're having a conversation, and it's my privilege to have a conversation with Andy Wood today around this idea of how are we getting better as organizations.
David, thanks so much, man.
Yeah.
I'm honored to be with you. I'm a little disappointed that we ended up wearing the same shirt today.
It's groupthink, man.
Yeah, we've been working together long enough now, so we're starting to wear the same clothes. But I am not going for the same hairdo. I'm just clarifying. Those of you who are listening, David has a shaved head, and my wife doesn't like the shape of my head. She likes my face, but not my head.
Well, then you should keep your hair as long as you can.
Yeah. So, hey, I want to say thanks to those of you who have been joining us the last few months, who've subscribed. A lot of you have shared this with your teams. You've been going through it conversationally, dialoguing, and we've been saying from the beginning, our goal with the podcast is to help you become the kind of leader that the people on your team want to follow. There is a marked difference between a leader that you have to follow, a leader that you want to follow. I won't ask David on camera for the podcast whether he's here because he has to be here or wants to be here. We'll assume it's because he wants to be here.
If you want to know that, just email me and I'll let you know.
Yeah. Personal email, private email, ask David. So yeah, we're going to have some fun talking about how to get better.
That's right. And this conversation really started for us as a team, and really for you, been leading our team in this. And so I'm excited for those of you who are joining with us today. This is kind of stepping into a conversation that is real life on the ground for our staff.
Yep.
And Andy, this whole idea of like, how do we get better, even as we get bigger, it's hard to do.
Yes.
But how did you kind of get into this place where you said, okay, I got to lean into this with our team?
Yeah, great question. So, for us, one of our primary goals is tenacious teachability. It's one of our 4 leadership values, we call it. And so we're always striving already personally and organizationally to become better leaders, better people, for our character to grow. So last month I talked about this idea of how do you specifically get better. Now the conversation, we're leaning it more in the direction organizationally. So I had this day, I'm sitting in my living room kind of journaling, thinking about an offsite that we were having. And I was trying to capture some different, I would say, frustrations that I was feeling. Usually it starts with frustration. And when I'm thinking about how to solve a problem for us as a team, I do want to help empower the team to solve problems at the lowest level possible. Sometimes there are problems that rise up as the organization grows that they're not getting solved at the front lines. And so as a senior leader or a directional leader, I want to be able to think, how do I solve this or help the team solve this with thinking? So a different paradigm. And then number 2, maybe to solve it by systems. And so as I was processing, one of the things that I noticed, our organization now has a little over 30 full-time people. When it comes to people who volunteer, there's over 300 that volunteer on a regular basis. And I started realizing that as we continued to grow, there were pockets of the organization that would get better. We'd make it better. We'd give energy to it. And then all of a sudden we'd watch kind of entropy kick in, Murphy's Law. It gets worse over time. And then you started to realize like there are a lot of things that need to get better as the organization gets bigger. And it's hard to harness the energy of 30 plus people, 300 plus people. I'm sure a lot of organizations is a lot harder, but to get all that energy moving in the right direction for the whole organization. And it just struck me, it gets harder to get better as you get bigger. There's just no way around it. It gets harder to get better as you get bigger. And when I realized that I had to switch my thinking. We had to switch our thinking about how to get better. We couldn't think about getting better the same way we thought about getting better when we were small. We had to develop a new paradigm about getting better. So that was kind of the genesis of it for me.
Yeah, that's really good. And let me ask you a question here. I think sometimes you've ever heard the phrase, like people think like, okay, bigger is better.
Right.
Or they think one day when I get to this size, well, then that's when it's all going to come together. I mean, you may have even said that at some point in your leadership is we'll have these resources. We're going to have this many people. The phrase
it must be nice.
So for those of you who are listening now, it's a phrase that has come up for people.
We have this is kind of an inside joke for us when one time I was talking to a pastor and they didn't have the same resources that we do, staffing, money. And then he made a comment like, it must be nice to have that size of budget. So we always joke about it must be nice.
Yeah. But there is, like, I think in all of us, there's that reality of like, we think it must be nice or it will be easier when.
Yeah.
So the reality though is bigger is actually harder to get better. So why do you think maybe first we get our perception off and then why is it actually not true? Like, why is it actually harder to get bigger?
Yeah. One of my mentors, Steve Stroop, says that, that when we started, especially, they were like, 10x at the size of what we were leading. And he used to always say, I have the same problems you do. Mine just have more zeros on them.
Okay. That's a good way to put it.
So I think, what happens is, like, I remember when we first started, so, for context, David and I have been working together now for 11 years, almost 10 and a half years. Yeah. We've known each other for 14, something like that, 13. Yep. But when we started, David, you've been on the team since year one. When you came on staff, we could all meet in one room together.
Yeah, we met around like a 6-foot folding table. So for those of you who are like just getting started,
So you could come to the meeting with a list of everything that you're working on for the week. We could put all the plans on one whiteboard.
Everybody was in the debrief for the weekend or for the event.
Yeah.
We all did it. We all debriefed it. We all planned it. Everything right there.
Yeah. And so, like, that's awesome. That was easy to kind of keep tabs on what everybody's focused on. As the organization has gotten bigger, there are people on our staff that I haven't had a meeting with in the last year. Mm-hmm. There have been times when we're having staff parties and I'm like walking over to you or Felipe saying, who's that? And so, I love our team and everybody's valuable, but it just changes. So you have people wearing lots of hats. We have now, with our 4 location, you have people wearing multiple different hats. So it's hard to know, okay, well, which department, which team, which objective do I focus on? Then you build systems of communication, and then those systems get maxed out. So you have a system that might work for 100 people or one location, and then you get 4, and so the systems get overmaxed. And then communication gets a lot more complicated. Mm-hmm. Another mentor of mine, a guy named Larry Osborne, talks about organizations are like teams. And when you have a small team, it's like track buddies or, golfing buddies. There's 3 or 4 of you out there. It's, what everybody's doing. Then it's like a basketball team where there's more defined roles. But eventually, if an organization gets over 30 people on it, even if you include volunteers into that mix, you are functioning more like a football team. Mm-hmm. So you have offense, defense, special teams, and a lot of times you have people that aren't even working with each other, but there has to be some level of interplay. There has to be some level of, the interlocking of objectives and systems. It just gets really complicated the larger the organization becomes if there is not a lot of clarity around how we get better and what we're focused on at any given point in time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so much I can see that. Like, as you're talking about it, I'm like processing so much throughout our history at different sizes.
Yeah.
Even when you talk about the team dynamics, I think this is one of the hard things on getting better is there's a relational component a lot of times.
Yeah.
And when you have to make those moves that not everybody's going to be in that meeting now, or not everybody's going to report to me, or not everybody's going to do this, like, these get hard to get better because now you're pulled into relationships and you're navigating so much more than just what we need to get done.
Yeah, you got expectations playing into it. You also have people tend to see the organization at the size it was when they came into it.
That's really good.
Certain people are good for certain sizes of the organization. There are a lot of people that can scale, but people can get fixed on, well, we did that way. I was in that meeting. Why didn't I get involved? So one of the little things, this is kind of a side, a phrase that we keep coming back to. We love the mission of our organization more than our place in it. So we give up preference for purpose. And not everybody can give up preference for purpose. So we've had to create that culture where the goal is to do what's best for the organization, not what's best for me.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, the culture plays into this so much, especially even into these next topics we want to bring up. Because in the talk with our staff, you mentioned that there's four real kind of needs that we need to kind of focus in on in order to get better. And so could you share a little bit with those and unpack that with us?
Here's what I'll do. I'll share the 4 things. I'll come back and break them down. First of all, is a clear leader. And we believe everything rises and falls on leadership.
Yeah.
So if you want a department to get better, you want a team to get better, a location to get better, it needs a clear leader. Underneath this, the leader needs authority to make it better, responsibility to know they're making it better, and the capacity to do it. So and all that falls under the bucket of leadership. Number 2 is a make it better mentality. So the people on the team, that they really are thinking, not thinking, oh, my job is to maintain it or to survive, but my job is to improve what's been handed to me. So if you've been handed a system, you've been handed a location, you've been handed your job is to improve it. Number 3 is adequate resources. So the whether it's the finances, the people, there's a lot of different resources you could put in that bucket. The time could also go in that bucket of resources, and then clarity on the boundaries. So what I mean by that, or we mean by that, is that sometimes people will play outside their area. And to clarify, like even we've had to say, we have campuses, for example. And one campus pastor came to me one time. He's like, "So what do you think about me like going around raising money for this project?" And I'm like,
I think that was me.
Yeah, probably was. I was going to leave it out of that. But it was, and at the same time, I'm raising resources for the campus. And it's like, well, there's a boundary here that we need to kind of put in play, because I'm having a lot of the same conversations with people, and the boundary needs to be clear. So I think all of those things are a part of, a leader, a make it better mentality, adequate resources, and clarity on the boundaries are all super helpful.
Yeah, that's really good. What would you say has been helpful in, like for you, right? So you're leading this, you're looking at things like, how is it that you've really helped kind of make sure you've got the right person? Because I think it's like you got to have a leader with the authority, the responsibility, the capacity. How do you go about like really getting that right person to be over that?
Yeah, I think that's the $1 million question.
I was hoping you could answer right now because I was going to take notes.
One aspect of it is capacity for sure. Like you don't want to put somebody in charge of an area that they don't have the capacity to lead that area. The thing that I would say with capacity is that is a very nebulous term. So one aspect of capacity that's most important is how well they can pull strengths out of other people. So you could, I think of my wife, for example. She never gives herself the kind of credit she deserves in terms of leadership. And one of the things I love about the way my wife leads is she gets people into the room, and even for her, in some ways, it flows out of her insecurity. But people flourish around her because she makes space at the table for them. So I think that's one aspect of it, the capacity of the leader. I also want to see in that leader that they lead towards the vision. So their agenda is not what I'm giving them. Their agenda is the big vision.
Do you have an example of that, or can you unpack that a little bit? Like what shows you that that's happening?
Yeah. So like, let's say, for example, a lot of it comes down to how they respond to change. So if a person, when you make a change, even if you've gotten their feedback, but the change is not what's best for their department, but what is best for the organization.
Yeah.
When you see that attitude of, and David, I think you're a great example of that you're like, I understand this is going to be harder on me. I understand that I might have to restart some things that I've started. I might have to make some changes I didn't expect to make, but I know that the bigger mission is what's most important. Then that's the kind of leader I can build with we can build with, because we know we can put them on any given assignment, and their loyalty is going to be towards the vision. And that characteristic honestly has to be cultivated, and sometimes it's hard to find. But I have been amazed in 12 years of shaping culture here now, and I think it's the byproduct. You don't get away with territorialism and silo mentality in our culture.
It's true.
So I think
it's not just from you. It's like now within our organization, like you're going to have multiple people down throughout the staff who
you're going to get an insane amount of peer pressure in our organization if you are leading towards your silo rather than the bigger mission. So to me, that's huge. I also like to work with people who are not always trying to cover their butt. So when a leader makes a mistake and they expose the mistake to me before I discover it, their cred goes up 10x in my mind.
Yeah. So it's like, because it's vulnerability.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I think we've talked about some, and you mentioned this a little bit in the last episode on getting better. So if you haven't listened to episode 3, highly want to encourage you to go back and listen to that, because that's about getting better as a leader. The vulnerability piece really does come up in our teachability.
Yeah.
Right? So when I expose to you my weakness, when I ask for your help or I invite something in, it's a risk for me. But for it says, oh, this person wants to get better.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and the truth is, most of the time it's going to be found out anyways.
Yeah. It's like parenting, right?
Yeah.
Like it's better for you with your kids for them to come tell you.
Yeah. So I think the kind of people that are willing to acknowledge their weaknesses and bring it to the light grow themselves and what they lead a whole lot faster. Because I know if they're like that with their own leadership, they're going to be like that as a leader over their department. And a lot of that flows from security and confidence and humility, all kind of enmeshed or entangled together in that person.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we're going to get better, we need to make sure we have a clear leader. We need to make sure they have a make it better mentality, because if you don't want to make it better, well, you can't get better. Adequate resources.
Yes.
So speak that for some leaders, because I know sometimes like we may get frustrated in an area, but we haven't really budgeted for it.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like in some ways, like what helps you go, that's a resource problem versus I'm mad at this person, and all of a sudden you're like, dude, I haven't put the staff money I need to there.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. So I'm just exposing tensions that we have as a directional team. So right now we're in the middle of COVID. We are in the midst of a season where our church is not closed. We are opened,
Absolutely.
but everything that we're doing is digital right now.
Yeah.
So rules keep changing. We had a plan to open our physical buildings again. Then we changed that plan, and thankfully we had not actually begun meeting physically. But we've had tension as we've wrestled through this at a directional level. And in the midst of this tension, one of the questions was, well, how are we thinking about campuses, physical location versus digital location? So when I heard that question, it was a big red flag for me in the language. And I said, well, let's just take verses and put the word and in there. They're both, we have 2 cars. One's called digital, one's called physical, and we're going to be driving them both for a long time. After COVID-19, we're still driving both cars. Right now, one car is parked in the garage, but we still need to do work on it to get it ready for post-COVID, post this shutdown period. Well, the question really is a resource allocation question. What are we giving time, money, and energy to? So one of the most important things for a senior leader or a directional leader or any leader is to have an abundance mentality about resources. It doesn't mean I'm frivolous. It doesn't mean I waste resources, but there are more resources. There's always more money. There's always more time. There's more energy that can be gained. But you have to think with wisdom in how I leverage my resources to put resource towards what's going to get me the biggest gain organizationally. If I have something that is really important and a high priority for the organization, but I'm not giving it adequate resources, financially, time, or people, then I'm communicating that that's not as important. So I just need to be honest as a leader, or we need to be honest with our teams about this is why you don't have more resources. This is the sandbox you can play in to get more resources. And quite honestly, in a volunteer-driven organization, most of the resources exist within volunteer leadership. So a lot of times what happens is leaders in a church get restricted in their mind. They're like, oh, I don't have enough staff. I don't have enough money. We don't have enough time. I need more people. And there are people in the church that are more talented, more gifted than any of us dream possible.
Yeah.
But it's a matter of us shifting the resource question. So I think one question is, what resources do I need to drive the vision forward? What resources are in my hand that I can use to get more resources? How do I need to think differently about resources and expand my thinking and realize this can happen. The scaling this question can happen with a direct team leader or a directional leader who's over an area.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's really good. Because I think that the resources a lot of times where people feel that tension, and especially I think for the second chair leaders and on down, they may feel like if they aren't the resource decision maker, they're trying to figure out, how do I lead up to say, I want to make this better, but there is a resource challenge.
Right.
And so how to get that voice out. So I feel like we're bringing up so many more questions for what people could be asking. So hey, here's what we want to invite you to do. Actually, you can contact us. You can email us, even at elcinfo@Echo.Church, or go to our Echo.Church/Echo Leadership or Leadership Podcast. Drop some questions in the comments. We'd love to know more questions that are coming up from this conversation and how we can answer those.
Yes.
So on the clarifying boundaries, do you have anything else you'd want to add to that for our listeners today?
I think that the main thing is just a lot of this comes back to communication and drawing the boundaries of what's most important for a team, for an area. I think that's all I got for it.
Awesome. Well, I know throughout our history, and a lot of people listening today have probably done this as well, is that you have made something better, and then you felt like we've arrived, we're here, and you turn around, and then when you come back, it's worse.
Yes.
And
it's frustrating, by the way.
It is, because then you feel like we've had that conversation already. We've already done that project. We've already done that process. Why is this happening again? So let me ask this, why do you think that is the case in our organizations?
Yeah. One of the illustrations that occurred to me, this is probably 5-7 years ago, I'm having a conversation. I'm like, I thought I dealt with this problem 3 years ago. And what occurred to me as I was reflecting on it is that leadership is a lot like climbing a mountain, and you're walking up the mountain circularly, going up it, and you get back to the exact same problem, but you're at different altitude with the same problem. So I think a lot of it is just inevitable. You're always going to have to deal with certain issues. You're going to have to deal with development. You're going to have to deal with employees that maybe need to be put on probation. You're going to have to deal with resources. All that is just a higher level of altitude. But I also think that certain things begin to happen when something is not sustaining or improving. It's symptomatic. Let me say it one more time. When something is not sustaining or improving, it's symptomatic. So there's some reason why. Not everything needs to go on for all eternity in terms of systems and processes and departments, but there's usually a reason why it's not getting better. So we've identified a couple of these. One of the most prominent ones for us has been when a capable leader has too many lanes to make better. We've seen that a few times.
Yep.
Another one here is if an executive leader or some leader dipped to improve the area, but then when they pulled out, they didn't empower somebody else. So, we fully believe a leader can dip. There's permission to do that if we need to make something better. A third one would be that sometimes you don't have somebody waking up every day thinking about, how do I make this better? Like in our reality, we have campuses. Every campus needs somebody waking up. How do I move this vision forward? Digital church for us, or a department like kids or students. There needs to be somebody that at the end of the day, that's what they're owning, that more than anybody else on the team is. If
Yeah.
that's not the case, another thing we've seen is people lose concern. So they get sidetracked, they get distracted, they lose their passion. So what they're leading goes down. Or the capacity of the leader has been outgrown. All of these, when I see this as a leader, I want to start poking around. And there may be another 5 or 6 things you could add to that little brief list. But there's usually a reason why something is not improving, and that is a symptom of a deeper problem. So I want to address the problem or find the problem at the deepest level possible.
Yeah, and there's we've seen a couple things too that we've read articles or heard talks on that say even like as you get bigger, because we're talking about getting better as you get bigger, like as you get bigger, even your staff transitions or turnovers at different levels actually has a greater impact.
Yes.
Why do you think that would play into this part for us?
So if you have, one of the big problems I think a lot of organizations have is tribal knowledge. So they don't systematize what they do. And I think that that's one of the biggest issues with turnover. So when a leader has a replacement mentality, where they say, I'm going to work myself out of a job constantly, I'm going to empower people, I'm going to build systems, usually transitions don't have as much of an impact. There's a difference between somebody who is a rock star and somebody who is a rising star or an empowerer of others. A rock star gets on the stage with a guitar, all the cameras are on them. There are other people that as they rise, they bring other people with them in leadership. So rock stars leave holes when they leave. And people who are rising stars tend to be able to leave things better than they found them.
Yeah. And there's part of it too, the rising star isn't always the ones that people see.
Yeah.
That's another side. So maybe the question, that actually brings up a great question, I think, for all of us to think about is, am I performing right now as a rock star or rising star?
Ooh, that's good.
So, challenge, sit down with your team, because if you, even one of the things we've seen is the bigger that we get, one of the things that makes it hard to get bigger, I think, is your multiplication of great leaders. Because you have to have more and more leaders who can lead at that level. And rock stars aren't producing those like a rising star is.
Yeah, that's really good, man.
That's a great nugget right there, man.
I think that originally comes from maybe the Radical Candor book, the Rising Star, Rock Star. Hero Maker is another really good book that kind of drills into that.
Yeah, the developing and things like that. Yeah, I highly recommend that book as well. So as we think about this, things get worse. But for leaders who are listening right now, whether they are leading the organization, they're a second chair leader, I think one of the questions that we have too is how, as I start to move into, I want to make things better. There's some steps I can take. But once I, with these steps, how do I really know where to put the energy to make better? When there's so many, there's so many places I can put my energy. How do I really get down to that refined area?
Yeah. So again, this is another kind of hinge point question. I have found that focusing for a quarter, mindset, and during COVID, it's been harder to have a quarter focus. It's easier to have months. I'm good sometimes to even get a week or a day focus. But for an organization to say quarterly, what am I going to bite off in this quarter that I'm going to make better? What's my highest leverage right now that is either a big boulder in my way or a really significant opportunity, that it's a rocket I need to light. So there's sometimes, and this is another one of my mentors' quotes, sometimes there are rockets you need to light, sometimes there are boulders you need to remove. So there's a lot for me of prayer and seeking God's help in the midst of leadership. I like to get a sense of what I think God is leading us in, and then leading the team in discovery and seeing those two come together. And then for me, I try to hold it open-handed in discovery. And then if we're in discovery and I get a real strong sense of, no, this is what we need to press into, I'll push back. But that for me is I don't know, once every few years. It's like and a lot of us have worked together for so long. We have such a similar philosophy of ministry that we might push and pull,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, we usually come to that conclusion together about what's most important now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's worth the investment in the team.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. So, because we want to help leaders really kind of get practical, move things to action. So now we define here's our focus. This is what we need to do right now, this quarter, this month. What would you say are like some ways that we can get in and start making things better in the organization?
Yeah. So one is just like recognizing who is the team that's making it better. So I would put in here having a committed team of people. This is a huge part of it. Another aspect of that would be that team meeting together regularly. So whether it's weekly, every other week, a lot of times these teams around making something better would be more of like an ad hoc focus team. So you're going to improve a process or a system or a department, but you have a number of people, and oftentimes that team that's improving something could be a cross-departmental team. But I think that the team with a regular meeting with clear objectives that are driving that area forward. So, for example, you might take an area like groups. For us, that would be our smaller groups. You could put a component on there of like improving ease of sign up and accessibility of groups. And that would be one of your 4 or 5 specific things. So that way, every time you're coming together, you're evaluating what needs to get done by the next time we meet, what has gotten done since last time we meet. And we have this deal where when we meet, we have a name and a date attached to things. Like we want to break it down to, hey, these 10 things are going to drive forward this one objective. It's really kind of thinking strategically from scaling it down into implementation. And then I would also say evaluation and systems are of utmost importance. So when I'm solving a problem, I always want to solve the problem with a system. I don't want to solve the problem flippantly, like I'm putting out. Sometimes you got to put out fires, but you're building systems in your mind. Systems oftentimes are boiling down to checklists of things that need to happen for a ministry to function, for a restaurant to roll. You know, it's the whole Starbucks has checklists for everything. In-N-Out has checklists for everything, but it's creating that systematic orchestration and then rigorous evaluation. So for us, that means that every big thing we do, we're stepping back on the back end of it. We're saying what went right, what went wrong, what was missing, what was confusing, and we're documenting that.
Yeah.
For us, that's in Google Drive. You can go to every event we've done over the last couple of years, find that event in the Drive, click on it. So next year you go to do the same event, you're like, oh, well, we learned, that you need to order the balloons 7 weeks in advance, because if you don't, So it's like all these little things are building systems and processes that make it easier and making sure that those systems and processes are communicated.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Yeah, so we can take these steps this week to start working with our team to make things better. So you have any reflection questions or kind of things that can help us process and know how to move this to action?
Yeah, I would say if I were in any leader's shoes, I would be, number one, asking for who's my team I'm running with, number one. Who are the people that I'm actively empowering when I'm helping something get better, number two. So those two would be connected. And I would go through, in the next 30 days, a time with my team to evaluate where are we and what do I need to focus on right now in order to improve it. I think if you did those 3 things, you would make a lot of traction. Number 4, I'd put together that team in a regular meeting process. Number 5, I'd help them determine what are the clear objectives they need to be focused on. And number 6, I would just determine that we're going to meet, and every time we meet, we're tracking what we get done, what are we going to do next. I know it seems super simple, and it is a lot harder to implement than it is to say in 2.5 minutes.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like losing weight or getting in shape. It's like it really is as simple as eating fewer calories than you work off. And so sometimes we can overcomplicate things. And if you have if you're consistent and you implement, even in this sense, what we've talked about today, 60, 90 days down the road, you can make significant strides in any team, in any organization, and you're going to come up against culture issues, resource issues. But if you entertain the future with more of an abundance mentality, that you can make a difference, you can get better, you can make things better, I think you can make far more progress than you imagine, but it just requires that tenacity and focus.
Absolutely. Tenacity and focus, man. I think that's a great way to sum up everything that we are talking about today. Because if you're going to get better, it's going to require both.
Yep.
Never going to quit, never going to stop, but going to make sure we're going after the right things. So, Andy, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today with all of us so that we can take back and get better in our organizations. And we hope that you are able to take this, talk together as a team. You can download the notes at Echo.Church/leadership podcast. Right there, go download the notes. You can even subscribe to our email list right there to make sure you get those dropped straight in your inbox anytime that we have a new episode that releases. Any final words, man?
Man, thanks for hanging out with me. Thanks for asking some really great questions. You're a great leader. I'm grateful for what you're doing to drive the Echo Leadership Podcast forward. And I'm excited to continue the conversation with you guys. Thanks so much for joining us today for this episode of the Leadership Podcast. Our goal is to help you become the kind of leader the people on your team want to follow. If you found today's content helpful, I want to encourage you to share it with 3 friends. There are people around us that need to get better as a leader. Your personal invitation to the community can make a massive difference. And we look forward to continuing the conversation. We'll see you next time.